guys, I'm Cameron and welcome back to my channel where we sip tea and also spill the tea as I talk about some of my favorite reads. So today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in the month of September, and guys, let me just tell you, this month was filled with so many highs and so many lows. So there are some books that completely shook me to the core, and then there was other books that were just very lackluster and just boring, to be honest. And at one point I went through a bit of a reading slump because there was just this one book that I read that was not doing it for me, quite frankly. But you know, I powered through and I was so happy that I did, because right after that I read a trilogy that completely flipped my world upside down, and I was just so addicted to it. So without further ado, let's get into this video. So in the month of September, I read a total of 13 books. It's not my best month. I could have read more if it wasn't for the dreaded reading slump, but you know, it was still a decent reading month nonetheless. So let's get into the first book that I read. So the first book that I read in the month of September was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about this because I did do a vlog where I literally spent about 40 minutes talking about the freaking amazing sequel that this was. But nonetheless, I will say that whenever I read this book, you know, I was expecting it to be amazing, but it just completely went above and beyond what I was expecting. I absolutely loved this book. This book follows a girl named Poppy and a guardsman named Hawk, who she had a forbidden affair with in the first book, and at the end of the first book she finds out a secret about Hawk which completely changed the way that she saw him, and it changed the whole relationship that they were building. And so in the second book, Poppy and Hawk are starting to get to know each other once more, and they are starting to really open up to one another. And in this book, I was so happy with how the author approached the romance, the relationship, and I just feel like this book was so much more fast-paced than the first book was. The relationship was so much more well done, and also the world building that was taking place was also just as good, if not better, than the romance, if that's even possible. And the ending, guys, like, that was the biggest cliffhanger ending ever. The author left us hanging so much, and I just want to dive off that cliff and see what happens next. Like, I'm so addicted to this series. I absolutely adored it. I love Hawk. He's one of my favorite book boyfriends ever, and yeah, I was just so happy with this book. So that was A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So the second book that I read was The Iron Flower by Miss Lori Forrest. So this book was also a sequel. It was the second book in the YA series, and I do have to say that I feel like this book was so much better than the first book, because in the first book, the things that were taking place, it was very slow moving. And to give you a bit of background, this book is about a girl who is a mage, and she ends up going to this very infamous school for different paranormal people, and in this school none of the paranormal people get along. There's so much tension between the different races that are in this book, and we just get to watch as our girl, as our main character, goes into this school, and she goes from not really understanding the other races and not really liking the other races to having some of her closest friends being of people that are part of the different paranormal races. And we just get to watch as our main character and the friends that she has made, as they try to take on all of the racial tensions that is occurring, and they try to change the world by forming their own type of rebellious group. So yeah, this book, I just feel like it was so much more intense, so much more fast-paced, because in the first book, like, the author was really taking a lot of time to explore the world and to explore the different races and classes, and now that we have learned those things, and now that the author has spent the first book setting up the world, she really dived into the action and into the fast-paced things that were taking place. So I do have to say that while I liked the second book more than the first book, I don't really like the romance that's being built between our main character and the special someone in her life. I just have to say that this author fell into the Insta romance trope, and it was just hard for me to root for these two characters to get together when I just felt like there was no substance between their relationship whatsoever. While I don't really like the romance, I do love the story in general. I feel like the story and the adventures that are taking place is really what carried the story for me and really what kept my attention. And even though I'm somebody who I absolutely adore the romance that is built in the story, like, I'm a romance lover. I love romance. I still feel like this story's plot was strong enough on its own to keep my interest. But yeah, that was The Iron Flower by Lori Foster. So the third book on my list that I read was Wicked by Jennifer L. Armentrout. So after reading A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, I was just so addicted to Jennifer L. Armentrout's writing. You know, I have read a lot of her other series, but I have never once read the Wicked series. And so I just assumed after reading all of Jennifer L. Armentrout's other books that I would totally be swept up into this world and that I would absolutely love this book. And guys, I was very sadly mistaken. So this book follows our main character named Ivy, who lives in New Orleans, and it's here where she is in this type of secret society where people can see the Fae, and the Fae is living in secret in our world, and it is their mission in life to slay the Fae and to make them go back to their Fae world, because in this book the Fae are not good people. So I thought immediately that I was going to love this book because, first of all, it's Jennifer L. Armentrout. Second of all, it's set in New Orleans, and I just adore New Orleans. I love the culture. I love the cemeteries. It's my thing. I've been to New Orleans before, and I truly want to go back there because it is just so amazing and so wonderful. So to know that this book was set in New Orleans, I was so beyond excited to be submerged into the culture because, you know, even though I can't be there physically right now, at least I could be there in spirit as I'm reading about it in this book. So I was excited for that. And then I was also excited for the romance that was going to be built because, guys, like, Jennifer L. Armentrout, she's just the boss when it comes to making sexy and amazing romances. I was so excited for it. But while this book wasn't badly written at all, it wasn't a terrible read. It just was not up to par as some of her other books are. I feel like the romance was pretty instantaneous. I didn't feel the sparks whatsoever between our two main characters. I felt like their relationship was kind of flat, and honestly, it was just this whole story, the romance, the fae, the paranormal elements, the action, it just was flat, and that's all I can really say about it. Yeah, that's basically it. The fourth book that I read was Shatter Me by Tahereh Mafi. This is one of those books that has such a big following, and almost anybody who reads YA has read this YA book. This book is basically like the One Ring in The Lord of the Rings. It is everybody's precious, and people either absolutely love this book or people absolutely hate this book. And I was somebody who, excuse my niece, she's kind of yelling downstairs. While I didn't absolutely love this book, I still really enjoyed it. So this author just has such a unique way of writing. She is so poetic, and she loves her similes and metaphors. And guys, I'm just somebody who, I love poetry, so I instantly just adored this way of writing. I just feel like it's so unique because we don't see that type of writing in YA that often. And so if you don't happen to know, this book follows a girl named Juliet who has the power to hurt somebody or even kill them by coming into contact with them and by touching their skin. And so she is somebody who everybody fears, and they end up putting her in a type of asylum to keep her from hurting people, and she's basically isolated for, I believe it was a year, and she's in a very rocky mental state whenever we first are brought into this world and whenever we are first introduced to her. And I just felt like it was so interesting to be in her head because she does not think like everybody else. You know, she has been isolated for so many months that her way of thinking differs from the norm. And it was just so exciting to hear everything that she had to say. I felt like the world that was being built was very richly woven, and there is just so much potential in this book. And I do have to say that the ending was so crazy. I did not expect that ending. This book just makes me think of X-Men, and the main character, Juliet, reminds me so much of Rogue, if Rogue was slightly insane and was very clingy. So yeah, I really enjoyed this book, and after reading the cliffhanger, the big twist that took place at the ending of this book, I just had to read the next one. This brings me to the fifth book that I read in the month of September, and that is Unravel Me by Tahereh Mafi. So that is the second book to the Shatter Me series, and this second book was pretty exciting. I really liked everything that took place. I felt like our main character, Juliet, really got to grow so much more, and we also got to see other characters that were previously introduced in the first book have more of a spotlight, and we got to learn more about the inner workings of these characters and why they are the way that they are. And we had the insta romance vibes going on. But you know what? That was easy to look over because I am just so interested in the world that is being built. I just really dig the X-Men vibes that are taking place. I like the revolution that we get to learn more about, and the whole story was just really well written. So yeah, that book was really, really fun. So the 6th book that I read was Renegades by Melissa Mayer. So I had high hopes for this book. I have read the Cinder series, and I am one of many people who have absolutely adored that series as well. I loved the first book, Cinder, so much that whenever I went to Disney World, I ended up convincing my parents to let me stay in the hotel so that I could listen to the audiobook of Cinder while my family were living it up in Disney World. And I absolutely have no regrets. To this day, I am so happy that I stayed in that hotel because that book was just completely amazing. I absolutely adored it. So like whenever I went into Renegades, I thought that once more I was going to love this series. And guys, I was just kind of let down whenever I read this book. So this follows a girl named Nova who is a villain, and she lives in this society where there are superheroes and there are villains, and then there are just like the regular people, you know. The superheroes have taken down the villains many years ago, and now the superheroes are seen as these type of celebrity figures, and this girl, Nova, is somebody who is trying to uproot the superhero regime. She wants to take down the superheroes and have the villains once again rule this world like they did in the past. And so she ends up joining the superhero ranks, and she's kind of like a spy. Guys, like, your girl just likes reading about villains. I love the villain. I like being able to sympathize with the villain. I like being able to read about morally ambiguous characters. I just find them so much more fascinating than the goody two-shoes, morally right characters. I don't know what it is, but I absolutely adore the bad guys, you know? And so I was excited to be in the head of Nova and to see what happened. Now, this book was not bad by any means. It just was not as good as the Cinder series. And this book was really, really long, as you can tell. And it was just kind of hard to get through this book. The relationship did not do anything for the story. I was not excited for the main two characters to get together. The action that was taking place just was kind of lackluster to me. It was just kind of boring. And yeah, I just could not find myself rooting for Nova. I didn't care if Nova got caught by the superheroes. The only characters I really liked that I thought were interesting were the other villains of the story. I thought that it was really cool to learn more about the villains that Nova lives with. They were very, very interesting. I also did like how all of these characters had their own unique power. I felt like the author gave them powers that we haven't really seen in other books and in other type of superhero films. So I thought that was really fun to read about. But other than that, I did not really care about this book. You know, it wasn't terrible either, so it was just kind of there, you know, just a little bland. So yeah, that was Renegades by Melissa Mayer. The 7th book that I read was The Rook by Frost K. Okay guys, so last month I read The Hunt by Frost K, and this is the first book and this is the second book. And guys, I loved this first book. It was so good. The relationship was so much fun and it really kept my attention, and I just really liked our heroine, who's the main character. I felt like she was so feisty, yet at the same time she was very innocent and very kind, and I thought that was really cool because while she does have a rough exterior, in the inside she's so soft, like a little kitten, like, you know, like she has her claws, but she's still fluffy and cute and sweet, and you can't help but root for her. You can't help but love her. And yeah, so I absolutely enjoyed this book so much. So I was so excited to read The Rook. And guys, this is another book that just did not do it for me. It wasn't as good as the first book whatsoever, but like I've said a lot in this video, it wasn't a bad book whatsoever. It still kept my attention. I finished this book in about 2 days. I still wanted to read what happened next, but I think what happened was this book just fell into that kind of second book syndrome where I just feel like this book was kind of a filler book. The author spent a lot of time building up the political tensions and really letting us get to know other characters that we needed to know to get us ready for the third book. And I just felt like this book was getting us ready for the events that are going to be taking place in the third book. And I do have to say that I didn't feel like the romance was that good either. I felt like our main character kind of veered off from the personality that she had in the first book. She wasn't as tough and as mentally strong. And yeah, this just compared to the first book, which I absolutely had on such a high pedestal, this one just wasn't as good. But I am going to read the third book because I really feel like things are going to turn around in the third book, that the relationship is going to pick up, the romance is going to be even better, and I feel like the action is going to be very, very exciting. So I am excited for the third book. I just feel like this second book was very much a filler, getting us ready for the events that are going to take place in the third book. So yeah, that is The Rook by Frost K. The 8th book that I read was a dark romance called King by T.M. Fraser. I don't want to get in too much detail into this book because I am going to be making a video where I talk about how I read dark romances for a week, and this is one of those books that I read in that week. So what I do want to say is that King is about a man who just came out of prison. He is somebody who is not a good guy. He is a drug dealer, and him and his friend have started their own illegal business. They have ties with a motorcycle gang, and they're just not people who are going to be winning the Upstanding Citizen Award at all anytime soon. And this book actually switches off between our main guy King and our main female character named Doe, and she is somebody who has found herself in a bad situation. She woke up not remembering who she was, and the police tried to find her family, but no matter how much the police tried, there was just nobody looking for Doe, and she has no idea who she is. So she ends up going to a group home where she is living there for a certain amount of time. She doesn't like it there, so she escapes from the group home, and she's been living on the streets since then. She meets a girl who is addicted to heroin and who basically convinces her to go to this welcome home party to King, who has just gotten out of prison. It's here where she finds herself in an even worse situation where she ends up crossing paths with King, and something happens where they have to live together, and from there a relationship ensues. So I have to say that this is the book that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. This honestly caused me to get into a reading slump, and it literally took, this book had about like 300 pages in it, and it literally took me like 5 days to read this book because, like, I don't know, I felt like there was so much more that the author could have done to build up the relationship between our two main characters. Like, I feel like there was so much potential between them, and there was so much potential for this book and this romance to be so good. And I just feel like our author missed the mark. But I do have to say that while this book did not deliver the best romance, I actually found myself really liking and enjoying the side characters. Like, I liked the side characters more than I liked our two main characters, King and Doe. I just feel like the side characters were so funny. It was just so silly because I went into this book knowing that it was a dark romance, and I expected it to be super bleak and crazy and just very, very dark, you know? And our side characters, they were just so very, very likable, and I found myself just looking forward to all of the scenes that the author wrote that had these side characters displayed in it. So while it took me a long time to actually finish this book, it still was enjoyable, mainly for the reason of the side characters. So yeah, that is King by T.M. Frazier. So guys, the next book that I read is actually a trilogy, and that is called Deviant King by Miss Renegades. Okay, so guys, I have to tell you, this book was one of my absolute favorite books of this month. Like, I almost liked it better than A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which, guys, that is such a big deal for me to say this because I was so obsessed with A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. That book was phenomenal. But this book was, I loved it purely for the fact that I was so surprised by this series. So this is a book that is a bully romance, and it follows a girl named Elsa who has basically been tormented by this guy named Deviant King at her private school that she's going to. They end up building an unlikely romance, and there are just so many twists and turns as she figures out why Deviant King was so cruel to her. And guys, like, let me just say, this book, oh my gosh, the plot twists and the betrayals that took place in this series was just so good. It truly kept me at the edge of my seat as I was trying to figure out why Aiden is the way he is and what exactly happened to make him the man that he has become. And the relationship that was built between them was insane. Like, Aiden is just so crazy. Like, I can't even explain how twisted and dark Aiden is. Like, he is not a good guy whatsoever. He's not a lovable guy whatsoever. And when I first read this book at the very beginning, like the first 200 pages, I hated Aiden. I did not like him. And the reason why I was so surprised about this book was that I'm somebody who, I don't like bully romances. I did not necessarily enjoy The Cruel Prince by Holly Black because I didn't like how our prince treated Jude in the story. And I have read other books like After by Amanda Todd, and I DNF'd that book. I could not keep reading that book. I could not give it the time of day because I hated the toxic element of that was taking place in the relationship in that book. But I decided to just try to read Deviant King and to see if this author could actually change my mind and change my feelings on a bully romance. And I don't know what it is about this story, about this trilogy, but it is just so addictive. And I do have to say that I did not read this book. I listened to it as an audiobook, and the narrator, there were two narrators. We had a female narrator and a male narrator, and they were just so phenomenal. They were not just reading this book, they were acting out this book. It was so good. I felt like I was watching a movie or something. Like, oh, guys, I know I'm fangirling so much right now, but I just loved this book. It was so good. It was so entertaining, and the other characters that are in this world is also so interesting as well. So I'm just going to put a halt right now to this conversation because I am just going into a deep hole as I talk and fangirl over this series. So if you are interested to learn more about this series, then definitely be looking forward to my video that I'm going to be posting here soon, where I talk about all the dark romances that I read in the month of September. So there's 3 books in the Deviant King trilogy. So after reading that trilogy, that brought me to my 12th book of the month. That was Crow by A. Zavarelli. So this book followed our main character as she had previously been spending months trying to find her friend who had gone missing and trying to talk to the police and to the FBI, and nothing has come up. And our girl knows that her friend, before she went missing, had been working at this club which is owned by the Irish Mafia, and so our girl definitely thinks that this has something, that the Irish Mafia has something to do with her disappearance. So our main character decides to try to get a job at that certain club and to try to get connected to the people that are within the Irish Mafia so that she can try to figure out what happened to her friend. So our girl obviously ends up working at the club, and it's here where she meets our main male character, Lachlan Crow. And he is, I think, the second or the third in command of the Irish Mafia. I can't quite remember, but he is obviously higher up in the Irish Mafia. He's one of the main leaders in the Chicago faction of the Irish Mafia. So they quickly end up meeting and they start to have a relationship together. Our main girl is pursuing this guy because she knows that he is higher up. She thinks that maybe she can find out more information about her friend by pursuing this man. And so things end up getting a bit chaotic and a bit muddied as she starts to forgo her mission to have this relationship with this man. She starts having actual feelings for Lachlan, and guys, I have to say, this definitely wasn't my favorite book of the month. I just feel like there are so many books that are similar to what was going on and what was taking place, and this one where I feel like they just did a better job than this book did in particular. So it wasn't a bad book. Once more, I know I sound like a broken record. It wasn't a terrible book. A lot of people like this. I just wasn't necessarily one of those people that was as addicted to this book as other people are. Yeah, I mean, it was okay. It wasn't bad by any means, but it just wasn't my favorite book. So that was that one. Now I'm going to be going to the last book of this month. That is the 13th book, and this is another dark romance that I read. It is called Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. Guys, this book is like the epitome of all dark romances. It is like the reigning king of dark romances. Penelope Douglas is so loved by the booktube community. I have watched so many videos where so many people just go on tangents as they talk about their love of Penelope Douglas and their love of her writing. And so whenever I came into this book, I was so excited for it because so many people have just really raved about this book. So I was very excited, and I feel like while this book was entertaining and I did enjoy it to a certain extent, it wasn't as good as so many people made it out to be. It wasn't bad though, and I think really what it was for me was that I didn't necessarily like the relationship that was built between our two main characters. I feel like there wasn't enough depth to our two main characters, and that our characters spent so much time being attracted to one another and having all these different sexual encounters that there wasn't any actual conversations that were taking place between our two main characters. Like, I don't know. I just wasn't here for the relationship. But I do have to say that besides the relationship, the things that were taking place, it was so twisted. Like, that truly kept me entertained. Because if you don't know already, this book follows our main character as she moves to a new city to go to college. Over here, she ends up finding out that she is living in the same apartment as her ex-boyfriend's brother, who she has had a crush on and has just absolutely loved ever since she was a child. And the older brother here, his name is Michael, he does not like our main girl. He actually has a vendetta to pick with her because a few years ago, prior to where we find ourselves in the book, while our main character was in high school, Michael's three best friends ended up getting in trouble and they had to go to prison. And these guys believe that it is because of our main character that they happened to get in trouble and that they ended up going to prison. So they want vengeance. These guys have just gotten out of prison and they have planned this huge plot to try to take revenge on our main girl. And guys, the things that take place are just so twisted, and and throughout the book it goes from us being in the present tense to us being taken back to the past as our author shows what happened that night that led to our three guys going to prison. So I really did like the type of plot that was being taken place. I liked how twisted that was, and that truly kept me on the edge of my seat. But I just did not like the relationship, and the relationship was the most important part of this book because this book is a dark romance. And I feel like while the book very much was dark and it was twisted and it was mind-boggling, the romance just was not that well written. I did not like our two main characters together. Yeah, so that was Corrupt by Penelope Douglas. That is the end of my September wrap-up. If you liked this video, then don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to post new videos every week. So comment down below if you are planning or have already read any of these books. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions on these reads. And yeah, as always, I hope you guys have an amazing day, and thank you so much for watching. Mwah. Bye.